Worthless children grow into the kind of legends that proud people never see coming. The first stone wasn't made of rock. It was a word, tossed carelessly across the crowded square on the morning of the Moon Blessing Festival. Worthless. It drifted through the crisp autumn air, followed by laughter that rolled from one end of the marketplace to the other. Emily Carter tightened her grip on the tiny hands beside her without looking back. 8-year-old Ethan walked on her right, his shoulders straight despite the whispers, while his twin brother Noah stayed close on her left, clutching the worn sleeve of her faded blue coat. The festival banners fluttered above them in silver and navy, filling the town with the scent of pine garlands, roasted apples, and fresh bread. Families smiled beneath glowing lanterns. Young wolves chased one another across the cobblestones. It should have been a day of hope. Instead, every step Emily took felt heavier than the last. "Look!" Another voice called loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The Omega brought her pups. Heads turned. Conversations faded into quiet amusement. A woman folded her arms with a pitying smile, while a broad-shouldered merchant shook his head. "Poor boys," he muttered. "No father. No future." Ethan's fingers curled into a fist, but before he could answer, Emily gently squeezed his hand. She didn't need to speak. Her touch reminded him of the promise they had made years ago beside the small fireplace in their little cabin. Kindness costs less than anger, and it lasts much longer. Ethan swallowed the words burning in his throat. Noah lowered his eyes, pretending not to hear as another laugh echoed across the square. The village elder climbed onto the stone platform where every family presented their children during the annual blessing. One by one, proud parents stepped forward while the crowd applauded bright young wolves displaying flashes of strength, confidence, or remarkable instincts. Then Emily's family was called. Silence spread faster than winter frost. Emily guided the twins onto the platform. The elder glanced toward a group of influential pack members before clearing his throat. "Emily Carter," he announced stiffly, "and her sons." No applause followed. Instead, someone in the crowd chuckled. "Why waste the moon goddess's blessing on boys who'll never matter?" Another voice joined in. "The pack should spend its time on future alphas, not forgotten bloodlines." Noah instinctively reached for his mother's hand. Ethan stepped half a pace forward, placing himself between the voices and his little brother. Emily noticed the movement immediately. Even now, when others mocked him, Ethan's first instinct was to protect someone else. Her heart ached with equal measures of sorrow and pride. She knelt until her eyes met both of theirs. "Keep your heads high," she whispered softly. "No one decides your worth except the choices you make." Ethan nodded once. Noah managed a small smile. The elder hurried through the ceremony, as if eager for them to disappear. The moment it ended, scattered laughter returned, louder than before. Emily rose, brushed the dust from Noah's shoulder, and led her sons away without a single word of protest. Behind them, the festival music resumed as though nothing had happened. But hidden beneath the towering pines beyond the edge of the square, a massive white wolf watched in complete silence. Ancient silver eyes followed the twins with impossible focus, lingering on Ethan just long enough for the morning sunlight to catch a strange crescent-shaped mark beneath the boy's collar. For the first time in generations, the old wolf lowered its head. Not in fear, in recognition. The walk home felt much longer than the 3 miles between the village square and the small cabin nestled beside the northern pine forest. The cheerful sounds of the festival slowly disappeared behind them, replaced by the gentle rustling of golden leaves and the steady whisper of the creek that wound through the valley. Emily carried the woven basket she had hoped to fill with festival bread and dried herbs, but it remained almost empty except for a single loaf and a handful of apples purchased with nearly all the coins she had saved that month. Neither Ethan nor Noah complained. They had learned long ago that silence often carried more kindness than questions. When the little cabin finally appeared between the towering evergreens, Noah smiled with quiet relief. It was small, weathered by countless winters, and the porch leaned slightly to one side, but to the twins it was home. Emily unlocked the wooden door and breathed in the familiar scent of cedar, dried lavender, and fresh firewood. She set the basket on the kitchen table before kneeling to remove Noah's dusty shoes. Ethan quietly gathered kindling from beside the fireplace without being asked. Every movement between them carried the rhythm of a family that depended on one another more than anyone else. As the afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows, Emily stirred vegetable soup inside a cast-iron pot, while the twins completed their reading lessons at the old pine table. Noah traced each sentence carefully with his finger, fascinated by every new word, while Ethan finished early and looked out the window toward the forest. His thoughts had not remained in the village square. They had stayed with the enormous white wolf hidden among the trees. He had only caught a brief glimpse before it disappeared behind the pines, yet something about those calm silver eyes refused to leave his mind. They had not looked frightening. They had looked familiar. "Mom," Ethan asked quietly, "have you ever seen a white wolf before?" Emily paused for only a heartbeat before placing another piece of carrot into the soup. "No," she answered gently. "Stories speak of them, but stories often become larger than life." Ethan accepted the answer, though his curiosity remained. After dinner, the three of them carried worn blankets outside to watch the sunset from the small hill behind their cabin, a tradition they had kept since the twins were old enough to walk. The valley stretched for miles beneath a sky painted with deep orange and soft purple clouds. Noah rested his head against his mother's shoulder, while Ethan skipped smooth stones across the creek below. "Do you think they are right?" Noah suddenly whispered. Emily turned toward him. "Who?" "The people in town." His voice trembled ever so slightly. "About us never becoming anything important." Emily reached over and brushed a loose strand of blonde hair away from his forehead. "People speak from what they can see," she said softly. "But life is full of things that cannot be seen until the right moment arrives." Ethan stopped tossing stones and listened carefully. Emily smiled at both boys, her green eyes reflecting the last light of day. "Promise me something." "Anything," they answered together. "No matter how others treat you, never measure yourself by their fear, their pride, or their cruelty. Measure yourself by the kindness you leave behind." The twins nodded. Far beyond the hill, hidden beneath the darkening forest canopy, the same ancient white wolf stood motionless once again. This time it was not alone. From the shadows, an elderly traveler wrapped in a charcoal cloak stepped beside the enormous animal without showing the slightest fear. The old man watched the cabin with thoughtful eyes before quietly saying, "After all these years, the bloodline has finally awakened." The white wolf never looked away from Ethan as the first stars appeared above the valley. The following morning arrived wrapped in silver mist that drifted lazily between the towering pines surrounding the Carter cabin. Dew shimmered across the grass while birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs that almost made the world feel untouched by yesterday's cruelty. Emily was already outside, hanging freshly washed clothes on a line stretched between two cedar trees. She glanced toward the forest every few moments without fully understanding why. Something deep inside her whispered that unseen eyes had watched over her family through the night. Inside the cabin, Noah carefully arranged breakfast plates while Ethan stepped onto the porch carrying a small bucket to collect water from the nearby creek. The cool morning air filled his lungs as he followed the familiar path winding beneath ancient trees. Every sound felt unusually clear. Every breeze seemed to carry a silent invitation deeper into the woods. Halfway to the creek, Ethan suddenly stopped. Fresh paw prints marked the soft earth beside the trail. They were larger than any wolf track he had ever seen. He crouched beside them, gently brushing his fingers across the outline. The prints looked almost new, as though whoever had left them had passed only moments earlier. Before he could stand, a quiet rustle echoed from the trees ahead. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes. Between shafts of golden sunlight stood the enormous white wolf. Its coat gleamed like fresh snow beneath the morning light, and its silver eyes rested calmly on the young boy without a trace of fear or hostility. Ethan's heart raced, yet an unexpected peace settled over him instead of panic. The wolf remained perfectly still. Neither one moved for several long seconds that somehow felt timeless. Then the animal lowered its head ever so slightly, almost like a respectful greeting. Ethan instinctively mirrored the gesture. The moment he did, a gentle warmth spread beneath the crescent-shaped mark hidden below his collar. He reached toward it in surprise, but the feeling disappeared almost as quickly as it had come. When he looked up again, the wolf had already turned away. Without making a sound, it disappeared into the forest shadows as though it had never been there at all. Ethan hurried home carrying the water bucket, unsure whether anyone would believe what he had seen. Emily listened quietly as he described every detail. She searched his face for signs of childish imagination, yet found only complete honesty. Before she could answer, an unexpected knock echoed across the cabin. Standing outside was an elderly traveler wrapped in a charcoal cloak, his silver hair resting neatly upon his shoulders. His weathered smile carried unusual warmth. "Good morning," he said politely. "My name is Walter Hayes. I have traveled many miles, and I was wondering if I might purchase a cup of water before continuing my journey." Emily welcomed him without hesitation. Hospitality had always come naturally to her, even when she had very little to offer. Walter accepted the wooden cup with grateful hands, but his attention quietly drifted toward Ethan. "Young man," he said with gentle curiosity, "have you ever felt as though the forest recognizes you?" Ethan hesitated before nodding. Walter smiled almost imperceptibly. "Then always remember something. Sometimes the oldest paths choose their travelers long before the travelers notice the path." Emily looked at the stranger with growing uncertainty. Before she could ask another question, Walter thanked her once more and began walking back toward the forest. As he disappeared beyond the trees, Noah noticed something strange lying beneath the empty chair where the traveler had been sitting. It was a small silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, delicately carved with the image of a white wolf. On its back were 4 words engraved so faintly they almost blended into the polished metal. Ethan slowly read them aloud. "When the crown remembers blood." Emily turned the silver pendant over in her hands again and again that evening, studying every tiny curve carved into its polished surface. The image of the white wolf looked impossibly lifelike beneath the glow of the fireplace, and the faint inscription lingered in her thoughts long after the twins had fallen asleep upstairs. She had never seen the symbol before, yet something about it stirred a distant memory she could not quite reach. Outside, the wind swept gently through the towering pines, carrying the scent of fresh rain and cedar into the quiet valley. Long after midnight, Emily carefully placed the pendant inside the small wooden box that held the few treasures she had managed to keep through the hardest years of her life. Beside an old family photograph and a faded ribbon rested a folded letter that she had never found the courage to open since her mother passed away. Tonight, for reasons she could not explain, her trembling fingers reached for it. The brittle paper crackled softly as she unfolded it beneath the flickering candlelight. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's, elegant and steady despite the years that had passed. Emily slowly read the first sentence aloud. "If you are reading this, the time of hiding has almost ended." Her heartbeat quickened. Every word that followed seemed to answer questions she had never dared ask. The letter spoke carefully about protecting future generations, about remaining unseen until the right season arrived, and about trusting those marked by the moon, rather than those crowned by pride. One line caught her breath completely. "When the child carrying the crescent awakens, the old promise will return." Emily instinctively looked toward the second floor where Ethan and Noah slept peacefully. She quietly folded the letter again before either boy could wake and worry over the fear growing inside her heart. The next morning began like countless others. Ethan split firewood while Noah gathered herbs from the small garden behind the cabin. Emily tried to push the mysterious letter from her thoughts, convincing herself that old family stories were only stories. Then hoofbeats echoed across the valley. 3 royal messengers wearing deep navy cloaks embroidered with the silver crest of the Northern Kingdom rode toward the village road. Every farmer and merchant stepped outside to watch them pass. The lead messenger stopped in the center of the marketplace and unrolled an official scroll sealed with dark blue wax. His clear voice carried across the entire village. "By decree of Alpha King Damian Blackwood, every child reaching the age of 8 through 10 shall report to the royal gathering 1 month from today. A trial of character and courage shall determine those worthy to continue the ancient tradition of leadership." Murmurs spread instantly through the crowd. Parents exchanged excited smiles while children imagined glorious futures. Then familiar whispers found Emily once again. "Even that Omega's boys will probably show up. Perhaps the king wants entertainment." Quiet laughter followed, but Emily no longer reacted. Instead, she noticed Ethan staring thoughtfully at the royal crest displayed upon the messenger's banner. It was not the crown that held his attention. It was the white wolf standing behind it, carved into the emblem exactly like the figure on the silver pendant resting inside their cabin. His fingers unconsciously touched the hidden crescent-shaped mark beneath his collar as a gentle warmth returned once more. Far beyond the village, inside the towering stone walls of Blackwood Castle, Alpha King Damian Blackwood stood before a massive stained glass window depicting generations of rulers. His trusted advisor approached silently and placed an ancient leather-bound record upon the table. The old man opened it to a page that had remained untouched for decades. There, beside a faded drawing of a crescent-shaped birthmark, was a single handwritten sentence. When the rightful heir is finally found, the White Guardian will kneel before no one else. The weeks that followed passed with surprising calm, yet beneath the peaceful rhythm of daily life, something invisible was beginning to change. Every sunrise found Ethan training himself before breakfast, not because anyone had asked him to, but because he wanted to become strong enough to protect the people he loved. He ran the winding trails through the forest, climbed weathered hillsides, and helped elderly neighbors repair broken fences without expecting thanks. Noah remained close beside their mother, learning the names of healing herbs, reading every old book they owned, and filling the cabin with endless questions about the history of the Northern Kingdom. Emily watched both boys with quiet pride, although the mysterious letter and silver pendant never left her thoughts. One crisp morning, the family prepared to travel back to the village for registration before the royal gathering. Parents and children crowded outside the town hall, dressed in their finest clothes while excitement filled the cool autumn air. Bright banners bearing the royal crest fluttered above the entrance, and guards carefully recorded every eligible child's name. Ethan and Noah patiently waited their turn. Some children smiled at them kindly, but others whispered exactly as they had during the festival. "Do you really think he belongs here?" One boy laughed. "This trial is for future leaders." Another folded his arms and smirked. Everybody knows leadership runs through powerful families, not forgotten omegas. Ethan remained silent. Emily noticed his jaw tighten, but he simply stepped aside to allow an elderly woman carrying a basket to reach the front of the line. The old woman smiled warmly and thanked him before disappearing inside. A royal official standing nearby quietly observed the exchange without saying a word. When it was finally Ethan's turn, the clerk paused after reading his family name. His expression changed ever so slightly before he reached beneath the table and removed an envelope sealed with black wax instead of the usual blue. "This arrived from Blackwood Castle last night," he said carefully. "It is addressed specifically to Ethan Carter." The surrounding crowd immediately fell silent. Emily accepted the envelope with uncertain hands while curious eyes followed every movement. She carefully broke the unusual seal and unfolded the parchment. The message was remarkably brief. "Ethan Carter is hereby invited to participate in the royal trial under direct observation of Alpha King Damian Blackwood." Gasps rippled across the square. Parents exchanged confused glances. Even the royal clerk appeared surprised. "There has to be some mistake," someone muttered from the crowd. "The king has never personally requested a child from this village." Another voice answered. "Perhaps the invitation was meant for another family." Emily looked down at the royal seal once more. There was no mistake. Ethan quietly folded the letter and handed it back to his mother without showing excitement or fear. "If they truly want me there," he said softly, "then I will simply do my best." His calm answer unsettled the crowd even more than the invitation itself. High above the village, hidden among the rocky cliffs overlooking the valley, the enormous white wolf stood beside Walter Hayes once again. The elderly traveler watched Ethan below with thoughtful eyes before speaking almost to himself. Humility before honor. Compassion before strength. The signs continue exactly as they should. The great wolf slowly lowered its massive head in silent agreement. At that same moment, hundreds of miles away inside the throne room of Blackwood Castle, Alpha King Damian Blackwood stared across a table covered with reports from every territory in the kingdom. None of them held his attention. His gaze rested instead upon a single sketch of a crescent-shaped birthmark copied from the ancient royal records. Without lifting his eyes, he quietly gave one final instruction to his captain. "When the royal trial begins, make certain that no one interferes with the boy from Pine Hollow. Whatever happens next must unfold exactly as destiny intended." The morning of the royal trial arrived beneath a sky so clear that every mountain surrounding Blackwood Castle seemed close enough to touch. Hundreds of families filled the enormous stone courtyard, their voices blending with the sound of fluttering banners and distant church bells. Children from every corner of the Northern Kingdom stood proudly beside their parents, each hoping to earn recognition from the royal court. Emily adjusted the collar of Ethan's simple gray shirt before smoothing Noah's hair with gentle fingers. They wore clean clothes carefully mended by their mother's own hands, modest compared to the embroidered jackets and polished boots surrounding them. Yet both boys carried themselves with quiet confidence. Ethan looked toward the towering castle gates, taking a slow breath. "Remember what you taught us," he whispered. Emily smiled softly. "Be honest. Be kind. The rest is never yours to control." Noah squeezed his brother's shoulder. "I know you will do well." A royal horn echoed across the courtyard. Every conversation stopped at once as Alpha King Damian Blackwood stepped onto the grand balcony overlooking the assembled families. His dark ceremonial cloak moved gently in the morning breeze, while the silver crown upon his head reflected the first rays of sunlight. His presence commanded attention without a single raised voice. "Welcome," the king announced. "Today we do not search for the strongest child. We search for those whose hearts remain steady when pride tempts them otherwise." The words surprised many of the noble families, but Ethan listened carefully, as though every sentence had been spoken directly to him. The first challenge began immediately. Small groups of children crossed a woodland course designed to test observation, cooperation, and judgment rather than speed. Ethan noticed frightened younger participants struggling to cross a narrow wooden bridge stretched over a shallow stream. While several competitors hurried ahead, determined to finish first, Ethan paused and offered his hand to a little girl who had frozen halfway across. She accepted gratefully. Together they reached the opposite side, followed moments later by two other nervous children encouraged by Ethan's calm example. Hidden among the royal observers, several advisors quietly exchanged thoughtful glances while writing notes upon their scrolls. Noah watched proudly from beside Emily. "He forgot about winning," Noah whispered. Emily smiled. "No, he remembered what truly matters." As the final children stepped from the woodland path into a wide meadow surrounded by ancient oak trees, an unexpected silence settled over the entire valley. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. A gentle breeze swept through the tall grass before carrying with it a familiar scent of pine and fresh snow. Ethan slowly turned toward the forest edge. Standing beneath the towering trees was the enormous white wolf. It emerged into the open without fear, its brilliant coat glowing beneath the afternoon sunlight. Gasps spread through the crowd. Royal guards instinctively stepped forward before Alpha King Damian calmly lifted one hand, signaling them to remain exactly where they stood. The magnificent animal walked across the meadow with slow, deliberate steps until it stopped only a few feet from Ethan. Every eye in the kingdom seemed fixed upon the impossible scene. Ethan remained perfectly still. He felt the familiar warmth beneath the crescent-shaped mark on his neck growing brighter than ever before, not painful but comforting, like the embrace of someone long forgotten. The white wolf looked directly into the boy's eyes. Then, before the entire royal court, it slowly lowered itself onto one knee and bowed its great head. A wave of stunned silence swept across the meadow. Noble families stared in disbelief. The royal advisors dropped their quills. Even seasoned castle guards struggled to understand what they were witnessing. High above them on the balcony, Alpha King Damian Blackwood closed his eyes for a single quiet moment before opening them once more. His expression carried neither surprise nor fear, only certainty. "The Guardian has made its choice," he said softly, his voice carrying across the silent meadow. "Now the crown must remember what the kingdom forgot." For several endless seconds, no one moved. The entire meadow seemed suspended between one heartbeat and the next as the white guardian remained bowed before Ethan. The breeze carried the scent of pine across the silent gathering, lifting the edges of royal banners while hundreds of astonished eyes searched for an explanation that no one could offer. Ethan stood frozen, his blue eyes locked onto the magnificent creature before him. He had imagined seeing the wolf again, but never like this. Slowly, almost instinctively, he took a single step forward. The white guardian did not retreat. Instead, It gently lowered its head even farther, inviting the boy closer. Ethan remembered his mother's words. Kindness before fear. He reached out with an open hand, his movements calm and careful. The instant his fingers rested against the wolf's soft white fur, a warm silver light shimmered beneath the crescent-shaped mark hidden under his collar. It was not bright enough to blind anyone, yet every person nearby could clearly see the gentle glow spreading through the air like moonlight reflected across still water. A quiet murmur swept through the royal court. Elder advisors stared at one another with expressions of disbelief. Some searched desperately through memories of ancient stories they had dismissed as myths during their youth. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes without understanding why. She did not see a miracle. She saw the little boy she had raised with patience and compassion standing exactly as he always had, offering trust instead of fear. Noah smiled through his own astonishment. "That is my brother," he whispered proudly. High upon the royal balcony, Damian Blackwood slowly descended the grand staircase leading into the meadow. His long dark cloak flowed behind him as every royal guard respectfully stepped aside. When the Alpha King finally reached Ethan, he did not immediately speak. Instead, he looked first at the White Guardian, then at the glowing crescent mark, and finally toward Emily. There was kindness rather than judgment in his silver eyes. "Many generations ago," Damian said, his steady voice carrying across the meadow, "our kingdom was founded upon a promise that leadership would never belong to the proudest bloodline. It would belong to the one recognized by both wisdom and compassion." He turned toward the gathered nobles. "Over time, we remembered the crown and forgot the promise." An elderly royal historian stepped forward, holding the same ancient leather-bound record Damian had studied days earlier. Carefully opening its weathered pages, he raised the book for everyone to see. There, painted centuries before, appeared the image of a young child bearing a crescent mark while a great white wolf knelt before him. Gasps echoed throughout the crowd. The illustration matched the scene unfolding before their eyes with astonishing precision. "The Guardian does not kneel before power," the historian said quietly. "The Guardian kneels before the one chosen to protect power with mercy." Silence returned once again. Ethan looked toward his mother, uncertain what any of this truly meant. Emily simply smiled through her tears and gave the smallest encouraging nod. Damian noticed the exchange. A faint smile appeared across the king's face, almost invisible but completely genuine. "The first lesson of a ruler," he said softly, "is remembering whose voice matters most." He rested one hand upon Ethan's shoulder. "You have already learned that lesson from your mother." Across the meadow, the same villagers who had mocked Emily and her sons only weeks before slowly lowered their eyes. None of them laughed now. None of them whispered. The measure of a family they had dismissed had quietly reshaped everything they believed. As the afternoon sun broke through drifting clouds, the silver pendant resting beneath Emily's coat suddenly grew warm against her heart. Hidden within its polished surface, an ancient engraving that had remained invisible for countless years slowly appeared beneath the light. It contained only one sentence. "The heir has been found. The journey to the throne has only begun." News of what had happened at the royal trial traveled across the northern kingdom faster than the autumn winds. Within days, every village, every marketplace, and every gathering hall echoed with the same astonishing story. The White Guardian had bowed before an 8-year-old boy from Pine Hollow. The family once dismissed with careless laughter had suddenly become the center of every conversation. Yet inside the guest residence prepared by the royal court, very little had changed. Emily still woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast herself. Noah still read beside the window overlooking the castle gardens, and Ethan still spent each morning helping stable workers carry buckets of fresh water before reporting for his royal lessons. Servants often offered to complete the chores for him, but Ethan politely declined every time. "If I stop helping because people recognize my name," he quietly explained, "then I was never helping for the right reason." Those words reached Alpha King Damian Blackwood before the day had ended. Standing beside the palace balcony, he looked across the training grounds where Ethan worked without realizing he was being watched. Walter Hayes approached with his familiar calm smile. "He has not changed," the old traveler observed. Damian nodded thoughtfully. That is exactly why he worries some people. Inside the Grand Council chamber, several noble families argued with growing frustration. They questioned ancient traditions, challenged forgotten records, and insisted that recognition by the White Guardian could not possibly outweigh generations of noble ancestry. The oldest council member allowed every complaint to finish before quietly placing the ancient history book upon the table once again. "The Guardian has never made a mistake," he said. "Only people have." His simple answer filled the room with uncomfortable silence. That afternoon, Emily received an unexpected invitation to the royal gardens. She found Damien waiting beneath a towering oak tree whose branches stretched across a quiet, reflecting pond. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply watched Ethan and Noah laughing together while feeding swans drifting peacefully across the water. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "Your sons possess remarkable gifts," he said. Emily smiled gently. "They learned everything important at home, not because they are remarkable." Damien looked toward her with quiet respect. "Then perhaps the kingdom has spent too many years searching for great rulers while overlooking great parents." Emily lowered her eyes, humbled by the unexpected compliment. "I only wanted them to become good men." Damien answered without hesitation. "That is how great kings begin." Across the gardens, Ethan noticed an elderly groundskeeper struggling to lift a heavy basket of freshly gathered apples. Without being asked, he hurried over and helped carry the basket to the nearby kitchen. The old man thanked him warmly, unaware that several royal advisors had witnessed the small act from a distance. One advisor smiled. "Every report says the same thing. He serves before he leads." As evening settled across Blackwood Castle, the royal bell rang throughout the courtyard, calling every noble family, advisor, and honored guest together. Hundreds gathered beneath glowing lanterns while the stars slowly appeared overhead. Alpha King Damien stepped onto the marble platform overlooking the crowd. Ethan stood beside Emily and Noah, unsure why they had all been summoned. Damien raised a sealed scroll bearing the oldest royal seal in the kingdom. "Tomorrow," he announced, "the crown of the first king will be brought from the Hall of Legacy. It has remained untouched for more than 300 years because no living soul has ever been acknowledged by both the ancient oath and the White Guardian." His silver eyes rested gently upon Ethan. "Tomorrow, the kingdom will discover whether destiny has merely revealed an heir, or whether the crown itself still remembers the promise made at the beginning of our history." The Hall of Legacy had not welcomed a gathering like this in generations. Morning sunlight poured through towering stained glass windows, scattering ribbons of silver and gold across the polished stone floor. Noble families, royal advisors, village elders, and visitors from every territory stood shoulder to shoulder in complete silence. At the center of the hall rested the crown of the first king upon a white marble pedestal, its ancient silver surface untouched by time. Delicate engravings of wolves and crescent moons circled its rim, each symbol honoring a ruler who had chosen compassion over pride. Emily stood quietly with Noah beside her, her hands folded tightly together as Ethan walked forward under the guidance of Alpha King Damien Blackwood. The boy's simple gray clothing remained unchanged despite the grandeur surrounding him. He had refused elaborate robes, saying they would not make him a better person. Damien had smiled and allowed him to come exactly as he was. Before the pedestal, Ethan stopped. Every heartbeat inside the vast hall seemed to echo against the stone walls. Damien spoke with calm certainty. "The crown has never been placed upon anyone by force. Every ruler in our history was accepted before being crowned." Ethan looked up at him. "What should I do?" Damien answered with a gentle smile. "Be yourself. Nothing more has ever been required." Ethan slowly stepped closer to the ancient pedestal. As he reached out with both hands, the crescent-shaped mark beneath his collar began glowing once again with its familiar silver light. The room held its breath. The instant his fingertips touched the crown, the engraved wolves surrounding its rim shimmered softly, as though awakening after centuries of quiet sleep. Warm light spread through the hall, reflecting from every stained glass window without blinding anyone. It felt peaceful rather than overwhelming, like the first sunrise after a long winter. Then something extraordinary happened. The crown slowly lifted from the marble pedestal without anyone touching it. It hovered gently above Ethan before descending until it rested perfectly upon his head. Not a single person moved. No hidden mechanism explained what they had witnessed. The ancient promise had answered for itself. At that very moment, the great white guardian entered the Hall of Legacy through the open doors. It walked with calm dignity across the polished floor before kneeling once again before Ethan. One by one, every royal advisor lowered their heads. Then the nobles followed. Then the guards. Finally, the entire hall bowed together in respectful silence. Emily felt tears stream gently down her cheeks. She remembered every lonely walk home, every whispered insult, every evening spent wondering whether her sons would ever be accepted. None of those moments had disappeared. They had simply become the path that led to this one. Noah reached for her hand and smiled. "You were right, Mom," he whispered. Kindness stayed longer than anger. Emily gently squeezed his hand. "Always remember that." Damien stepped beside Ethan and addressed the kingdom with quiet strength. "Today we celebrate more than the beginning of a future king. We remember the truth our ancestors trusted from the very beginning. Greatness is not inherited through pride. It is earned through character." Ethan looked across the countless faces filling the hall. Among them were villagers who had once laughed at his family. He recognized every familiar face, yet he felt no desire to embarrass them. Instead, he offered the same warm smile his mother had shown him throughout his childhood. "If I am allowed to serve this kingdom one day," he said clearly, "I hope every child grows up believing that kindness is never weakness and that no family should be judged before their story is finished." A peaceful silence followed before the entire hall erupted into heartfelt applause. High above the castle, church bells rang across the mountains as sunlight bathed Blackwood Kingdom in brilliant gold. The forgotten promise had finally returned, not through power or privilege, but through the quiet courage of a mother who never stopped believing in her children and a boy whose greatest strength had always been the kindness everyone else had mistaken for weakness.